Hello everybody. In this video I'm going to be talking about this YouTube video that I saw called Why Democracy Leads to Tyranny from Academy of Ideas. And it's very interesting because the idea I think that has stuck with me the most from this video is this quote, actually I think by some author that the guy in the video mentions, which is like, if 5 men are at some place and 3 decide on one thing and the other 2 decide on a different thing, the 3 that decide on something are going to accomplish their goal just because they're majority, right? So it's like, what is the logic or the magical power behind democracy, behind the idea of the majority wins, right? Because the video goes on to explain that democracy is a sort of soft tyranny nowadays in our modern world, where the system we all know the system is imperfect, right? The democratic system, because it's a system based on representation by politicians that at the end of the day aren't really doing what they're supposed to be doing. Some may, but I mean, I've always known that those position of powers like the presidency or like governor, or those like positions of power are are hot points, right? Where a lot of different interests from a variety of sources come into play and come into contact. So it's actually really hard to get anything done. There's just a lot of arguing and bickering. But in this representation democracy which we live in, which is called indirect democracy, it leads to a situation where people are competing basically to have the majority, right? So it's like, okay, I'm gonna teach you the game. The game is democracy, and you win not based on your arguments, not based on truth, not based on if you're right, not based on if it's the correct thing or not. You win based on majority, right? And that's kind of the problem, if you see, because if most people are saying something or most people agree with something, even if they're wrong, they still win. They still achieve their goals versus the other people that aren't really in accordance to them, right? Now, there's this whole thing about minority and majority, right? Like the people are the majority, like the common everyday people, and then the minority, like the 1%, are the people that are behind the scenes controlling and pulling all the strings, right? But then I think about revolutions, like, how do revolutions come about? Revolutions come about thanks to 2 different situations or activities. The first one is the mass, right? So the mass needs to come together and basically rebel against the established order, right? And that is a mass thing, that is a numbers thing, that is almost like a military thing, right? That's a physical brute force type of thing. And then the other one, the other characteristic that has to be present in order for a revolution to be successful, is like the whole mental side, right? Like planning a government, the constitution, setting up the legal conditions for the transition of power, etc., right? So if those 2 things are present, if there are people that are willing to fight and die for the cause, and there are people with innovative, creative ideas for establishing a new government, well, that's when a revolution and independence comes about, right? Now, for me, it's very interesting because this whole democracy idea basically leads to competition. Inevitably, it leads to competition, and inevitably, it leads to corruption. Like the video explains, it's in our human nature, and it's not so much. I love this because the video explains it the video explains it wonderfully. It's not that power corrupts; it's that power attracts corruptible people. All right. So in order for anybody to win a majority vote, or for them to win the popular vote, or to win the majority of the people, there has to be a type of person that is kind of like a sociopath, you could say, to a certain extent, right? They need to appeal to the masses in a very attractive way, while at the same time hiding their deficiencies, their weaknesses, and their intentions, right? So yeah, democracy fuels competition. So at the end of the day, we kind of fall back into the whole basic primitive mentality of people, right? Where it's like, okay, the game is democracy, let's play it, right? Majority numbers. And then, well, voting is submissive unconsciously. This idea, I think, is because I've never voted, but I think the moment that you vote, like the moment that you do that action, you're telling yourself subconsciously or unconsciously that you no longer have any power to do anything, that you're putting your vote, you're almost putting the responsibility to the other person, right? To an also imperfect human just like you. So I think the idea of voting is ridiculous. You know, why would you do that? Why would you believe that some other Joe Schmo is going to do, you know, things that are, I don't know, beneficial for you? Or, you know, they don't even know you. Like, what are you doing? Because I have this idea that if like just people stop voting in general, maybe the government would be like, oh damn, like, you know, people aren't even believing in this anymore. I mean, I'm not saying that you should, but you know, there's a lot of elections coming up this year, 2024, and all that. So yeah, this other idea that I wanted to discuss is we rule, which is the democratic lemma, right? Like we the people rule, we're the ones in charge. I feel like it's kind of like the student center approach that we've seen over the last couple of years or decades in the learning teaching process, or the teaching learning process, which is basically like teachers used to plan classes based on what they thought, the teacher thought was the best methodology, planning, activities, homework, whatever, right? Tests, evaluation. So then as like the 90s, 2000s came about, we start to enter this new world of, you know what, it's no longer what the teacher wants to teach, it's what the student wants to learn. You know, like make it all about the student. But in reality, the teacher is still having the control. They say the teacher is more of a guide. So the teacher is going to guide the student's process, the student's critical process and learning process. But I think in reality, the teacher's still in charge. So I see democracy as kind of that student-centered approach where they say, you know, the government's in charge, but the people are really the ones in charge. You know, it's all about you, you know, and you rule, right? Like the majority rules, when in reality, that's not true, right? So that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. What do you think? Do you think that democracy does lead to competition? And if it leads to competition, is that competition healthy or unhealthy? Is it regulated? Should it even be regulated? I don't know. Give me your thoughts on that, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, peace.